people often say this is so morbid or it's so depressing. I really think of it more, as you said, about being prepared and practicing in good faith, in compliance, and then with peace of mind, knowing you've done all that you can, you've made your best effort to care for your patients and your family. And then you can live a long and healthy, hopefully, life and practice
right.
well, knowing that's off your plate.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 379 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you've joined me, and so glad you're listening in to this particular episode. My guest today is Dr. Robyn Miller, and Robyn and I talk about the importance of planning for the worst. You know, it's not something that we all like to think about, but Robyn has just learned from a lot of her own experience. And also you'll get to hear the story around why she started her company called TheraClosure. And just thinking about professional wills, what would happen if something were to happen to you? What would happen to your clients? What would happen to your practice, and all of those kinds of things. And so it's a really good topic to listen to, maybe not the most joyful, or some might consider it kind of morbid, but it's reality. And I can tell you from my own experience, and Robyn and I talk about this a little bit in this particular episode, the importance of just really being prepared for most anything that comes up, not necessarily a worst case scenario of a death, but what if you were to become incapacitated in some way, had some sort of illness or anything like that, what's going to happen with your clients and that sort of thing. So anyway, looking forward to you hearing from Robyn and our conversation about what it means to set up a professional will and just all the things you need to think about in terms of the worst case scenario. But before we get to my conversation with Robyn, a couple of things I'd love for you to check out. One of the things is we have got partnered with a company called Fully Booked Pros, and their thing is that they help therapists and counselors and those of us in private practice create Google ads for their practice. In particular, those people that are in a private pay practice, one of the things that I'm just hearing more and more people talk about is how it's getting a little more difficult for private pay therapists to get the referral sources that they need. So a big way that you can help with that is through Google Ads. And so if you'll go in over to practiceoftherapy.com, practiceoftherapy.com/FBP. That's practiceoftherapy.com/FBP. And you can find out how they can make doing Google Ads easy for you and your practice and getting more traffic to your website and also potentially more clients. So be sure and check that out. And as always, I'd love for you to check out my friend Ashley's online store, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And there you can find all sorts of swag and items for those of us in the mental health professions, along with just some inspirational t-shirts and swag around mental wellness and also addiction recovery. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And so also, before we get to my conversation with Robyn, I'd love for you to hear more about one of the members of the Psychcraft network along with some words from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins. If you don't know us yet, we're the host of the Shrink Think podcast, which bridges the gap between therapists and clients.
The Shrink Think podcast is proudly part of the Psychcraft Podcast Network, focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives.
Join us every Wednesday in our engaging, informative conversations and lighthearted humor to help you normalize and demystify therapy for those beginning or continuing their mental health journey.
We discuss everything from understanding styles of therapy to addressing conflict with your counselor, learning about attachment styles, and the fear triangle. We seek to run the gamut of topics to pull back the curtain and empower effective therapy.
If you haven't listened yet, you can find us at shrinkthink.com/podcast and discover other resources, including educational videos and fun swag at our swag shop.
Rachel here with a quick shout out to TherapyNotes, the EHR that Gordon uses and loves for running his group practice. If you've ever been looking for a solid, all-in-one platform to manage your notes, scheduling, billing, and even secure client messaging, this is it. Gordon's been using TherapyNotes for years, and it's honestly made a huge difference in how smooth things run behind the scenes. He's always saying how it saves him time and keeps everything organized, and as a practice owner, that's huge. And get this, they've just rolled out Therapy Fuel, which is an amazing suite of AI tools that help write your notes faster. You can generate progress notes from session summaries or even from transcriptions. You can also create contact notes straight from secure messages and automatically summarize client history forms. Basically, it's like having a little documentation assistant built right in. Plus, TherapyNotes is always adding new features like automated payments, secondary insurance billing, and a growing library of outcome measures. And if you ever get stuck, their customer service is phenomenal. Seriously, you can call or email 24/7 and talk to someone who actually knows what they're doing. So, if you've ever been thinking about switching or just getting started, now's a great time. Head over to therapynotes.com, click Start My Free Trial, and use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free. All right, back to the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Robyn Miller from TheraClosure. And I think you're going to find this topic just really interesting, just about what we do if something were to happen to us. But Robyn, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Sure. So I am a psychologist and I have been in private practice for almost 25 years. And during the course of my work, I have had to step in for two very close colleagues who suffered untimely tragedies, both seemingly healthy in their 40s. And through that process, really learned how devastating, of course, the impact is on our clients and all that's required to take care of patients and referring them on and securing the medical records in compliance with the law and, closing down a practice at the same time as I was grieving myself and wanting to help the family who had just faced this traumatic loss. It's a much bigger endeavor than people realize, and it is written in our ethics code. So having gone through that a couple times myself, I started writing about it and talking about it. And in reaction to people's surprise, I figured we needed to have an easier solution, an easier way to approach this so that more people could actually get it done rather than having it hang over their heads.
Yes. And it's interesting because that topic has come up for me. Just, people that follow this podcast know that I had to take some time off when I was going through she was in hospice care and then eventually died. And so I had to go through all of that. And so it was real important. And then I just thought those very things, if something were to happen to me, what would happen to my practice? What would my daughter be left with? All of those kinds of things. And so I think it's just, you're really thinking ahead, planning for the worst, as they say. So it just makes I think it makes a huge impact to do all of those things.
I'm so sorry for your loss, but
No, well, thank you. Yes.
How the family is impacted. And so if the loss is of a therapist and the family is not in the field as well, then they are left with having to contact patients and let them know. They don't know how to do that. They don't know how to find referrals. They don't know the ethics codes and legal responsibilities around the medical records in that situation. Sometimes records get put on the curb because the family's just getting rid of boxes that were kept in the basement for 25 years and they don't know any better. There's a real risk in addition to the tremendous burden that is placed on a grieving family at that time. So planning, I like to think about it not as being paranoid that something is to happen. People often say this is so morbid or it's so depressing. I really think of it more, as you said, about being prepared and practicing in good faith, in compliance, and then with peace of mind, knowing you've done all that you can, you've made your best effort to care for your patients and your family. And then you can live a long and healthy, hopefully, life and practice well, knowing that's off your plate.
Yes. And, I think, now that I've got a bit of gray hair and just knowing how life is, I was having a conversation with someone last week, just about this very topic about as you get older, you recognize the finality of life, and none of us are immune. That's not trying to be, like you said, not trying to be morbid, but just being realistic about things and just thinking about the impact it's going to have on our loved ones in particular, but also you're in a group practice, colleagues, all of those kinds of things is going to make a big impact on people. So, but Robyn, tell us a little bit about your process and more about TheraClosure and how all of that works.
Sure, I'm happy to. I want to add one more thing before we move to that in response to what you were saying. Sure. I want people to understand that this is in our ethics code for all disciplines, saying that we accept the responsibility to plan for the well-being of our patients, continuity of care, and for the medical records. And if we think about it, we use our alliance, our bond with our patients, no matter what orientation you have to the therapy and the work that you do. We all believe that alliance is really important. And we can't only think the alliance is for good. The alliance is going to help the patient heal. I think it is, and we all believe that. But then we have to understand the other side of it. If we have that much power to help people change in positive ways, we also have that much power to impact people with our sudden abandonment. Not that we would intend that, of course, and in any kind of loss, but that's how patients experience it, as a rejection, as an abandonment, as they are suddenly left not knowing what to do. They are sometimes not notified. I've had people tell me, I thought my therapist just gave up on me. They didn't call me back 2 months, and then I found out that they died. People have been notified by text message. So part of our duty as a therapist, not only to plan, but again, we value our emotional tolerance of hard things. We talk about shame and anger and rage, all kinds of things that, we use our training to be able to sit with. But mortality is one that even us as therapists, we don't want to talk about, but we owe it to our patients to be able to do that hard work too and accept, as you're saying, kind of life is not predictable.
Yes, yes, it really isn't. And I will just to kind of lead off our conversation a little bit with this. I know back when I was going through all the care of my wife and all of those things, I remember talking to a colleague of mine, a close friend of mine, Dr. I'll give a shout out here to Dr. David Hall, but he and I had this conversation. I said, okay, David, you're going to be my person to know where everything is. And he runs a similar practice to mine in another city. And so I said, okay, here's where all the passwords are. Here are all the things. And then I told my daughter, if something happens to me, David Hall's your go-to person. Now I know that's not a complete kind of thing, but that was a starting point for me.
A really good start, a start that's much better than most people make.
Mhm.
Will either never think about it
Mhm.
or think tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And it is so important to recognize the details, some of which you're referring to. So what we do in TheraClosure to answer your
Mhm.
question is to address this as comprehensively as possible, to make it as easy as possible for practitioners to get it done. So what does that mean? We meet with people for an hour consultation because we want to know you in a personal way. We want to know what kind of therapist you are, what kind of practice you have, what kind of patients you see, what's important to you, how you relate to your patients. Really want to understand so that if we need to step in to serve for you, we are doing it with the degree of compassion that I did it for my two closest friends.
Mhm.
But we, as people that are not in your intimate circle, we would have the benefit of some distance to be
Right.
to provide the clinical care and assistance to your clients and take care of all the business without being overwhelmed and personally devastated by the grief of a loved one, the way it sounds like maybe even your good friend David Hall would be if something were to happen to you. And
Right. Right.
I've kind of come to this place where I think even though the standard has been just as you did and just as I did with my friend so many years ago, to say to a colleague or a friend who knows you, hey, would you do this for me if something were to happen? I've come to see that that's really not best practice because
Mm.
it burdens the person or who cares about us
Mhm.
at a time of loss. And the job is really much, much bigger than people recognize. So let me go back and try and succinctly tell you what we do.
Okay.
We get to know you in your practice. We take you through a whole series of questions of things you might not have thought about. If something were to happen to you, what about your patients and who do you want them referred to and how do you want them notified and who's going to take, if you have a testing practice, who's going to continue the work of the writing the report if you haven't completed it yet. If you have a group practice, who's going to notify your staff and which one of your staff is going to step up to continue payroll and keeping the lights on until a time when your estate is able to decide what happens longer term to your practice. A million questions, including what are your boundaries? Do you want patients to know in great detail your circumstance or your situation, or do you want that kept more private? Do you want them to attend a service for you, or do you want them told that that's private and for family only? All these things to think about. And then we also get into the weeds about how would we find that information? Do you have an EHR? How do we get access to the passwords? If you have paper files, how are we going to get the information about your calendar, your patient contact list? How do we take custody later? We go through all of these questions. We put it in a legally approved professional will that names TheraClosure as the practice executor. So you don't need to burden a colleague or a friend. And then we are on retainer for you. And we, yearly renew that. And we would, if notified then that something happened to you, whether it's, the ultimate, a death, or sometimes an incapacitation where the second person, had an untimely accident and we didn't know if she was going to get better. And thankfully she did, but there was a period of time where her patient be notified and kind of held until that happened, and some wanted to be referred out rather than waiting. So for all of those circumstances, you can have the relief of just trusting that someone is ready to step in, and then there would be no final costs to your estate. You controlled those costs by paying it forward, kind of like car insurance. You hope nothing's going to happen, but if it does, you're covered, rather than the alternative, which is either nothing is in place or in a friend. And sometimes those agreements say, my estate will pay you your hourly rate for the time it takes you to perform these duties. And people think, sure, at 2 or 3 hours, my estate will be happy to pay you. But it's really like 40 hours of work. State might get an unexpected $10,000 bill. So it's important to kind of think about what the alternatives are. As we've tried to come up with the solutions that would keep everything really fail safe, so nothing falls through the cracks.
Yeah. I think one of the things too, just with everything being just kind of electronic, do you all have a way to, people, we update our passwords regularly and all of that sort of thing. And so I just wondered how you manage those kinds of things.
Exactly. We tried to think through every obstacle. So this one we provide, if patients want to use it, we provide free a password manager. And you can use that on your computer to capture only your professional accounts. We ask for only the things typically in EHR, maybe a website access, or maybe your professional email accounts, only the things that we would need, not your personal. But that captures, just like Google or just like, Apple password, it captures it and it's only on your computer and with that company on the cloud storage for them, and it updates automatically. But you name us as the emergency contact with the password company, so that if we were notified that something happened to you, we would initiate that emergency protocol by reaching out to the password company and saying, hey, Gordon has told us we're the contact, here's our certification, we need access. And they, through a particular secure process, then release the passwords to us once they've verified that they should indeed do that. And have always the access to the most up-to-date passwords, but we don't have any confidential patient or protected health information at all until that time. So you have to worry about, is there any confidentiality issue regarding your patients and their materials being secure? Because we don't have them until we were stepping in as the executor, and then we do take custody of them in a HIPAA compliant and secure manner.
Yeah, I was curious as how that works, because normally I guess in our regular way of thinking, we have to have a release from a patient to release any information. But in cases like this, how does that generally work? Is it just because technically we're not even supposed to share who our patients are? And so all of those kind of things. So how does that generally work?
It's a great question. So we suggest that people who use our service put in their informed consent just a statement that I have arranged with a clinical service to take custody of my records and assist patients in the event of an unexpected practice closure, or you can say an incapacitation or death. And you can say, they are TheraClosure, and you can list our contact number, or you can leave it more, vague. But that way you've kind of done your duty to let them know that possibility exists. But even if you haven't done that, we don't require consents because we have first the professional will, that is a contract that names us as the person responsible for stepping in for clinical care and records. We also have folks sign a business associates agreement so that you're covered for HIPAA compliance, that, we are then an agent of your practice. So we have that responsibility of notifying patients, and we only access the minimal information required, and patients have then the right to request their records or to have their records transferred to a new therapist. And so it's also another advantage of having TheraClosure do it rather than, someone in your town or in your suite, because you also don't know if that person may know one of your patients socially. And so, there is that possibility of some sort of, too close for comfort contact. And we are so removed from your personal world that it is a more anonymous, option for patients.
Right, right. Yeah. I guess one thing too that people maybe don't think about is just I know a lot of folks, particularly in private practice, use social media to kind of market their practice, and then all of those contacts in that context, them knowing or that sort of thing, or things being posted, all of that.
So we offer, again, totally comprehensive. We ask, if you have social media, do you want us to close it down? Do you want us to change an auto reply from your professional email or on your voicemail or on your website saying the practice of, let's say, Robyn Miller is now closed. Please contact TheraClosure for more information regarding records and any assistance that you might need. So we encourage people to leave, especially a phone and a website, up for 1 year. So people who are looking for you would know where to go for their records.
Right, right. Yeah, that's another thing I think in particular for solo practitioners, all your records, technically I think in most states you're supposed to keep records for 5 to 7 years. And so being able to, and typically too, with I think a lot of people now are using electronic health record systems, so it's available, and then being able to maintain the access to those records if someone should request something. And I'm assuming that you all kind of manage all of that so that
So
people
the
can get
way
access. Yeah.
Exactly. The way we handle it is once we've notified the current patients, they're our first focus because they're the ones that are going to be knocking on your door or waiting on your Zoom and not knowing where you are, and depending on their needs, whether it's a crisis-oriented need or whether, they need just support to process this loss that is going to be shocking and destabilizing for them. And then they need some help with referrals for ongoing care. Those, taking care of them is our first priority. But once that is done, then we move into the business of the practice. So if you wanted us to, we could send out final statements through your EHR to collect outstanding payments so that your estate benefits from you getting paid for work that you have already done. We can close out auto pay for, let's say your Psychology Today or your, this account or that account, so that they're notified, like your licensing, your malpractice, all of those things. And then records, we take custody and responsibility. So all of the EHRs have their own procedures, but we can download all of your files and then store them ourselves in our HIPAA compliant electronic vault so that we can close your EHR so your estate doesn't need to keep paying for it for 7 years. Your estate, for kids, it's often until 18 plus 7. So if you're seeing, a 12-year-old, you got to keep those records for like 13 years until they're 25. This is a long time. And so we take responsibility for that. And then if they were to need their records, we would be able to, facilitate the transfer of that.
Well, what a commitment for you all. Kudos to you. I mean, because that's a lot to take on there. I know one thing, Robyn, people are going to be curious about is the cost involved. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
I am happy to. I know it is hard to think about why this makes sense. So I want to explain why it makes sense. So like I said a few minutes ago, if you have an arrangement with a colleague and they have to step in to do this, think about the time required to call all the patients, to speak with them, not in a hurry, but to care for them as they're processing this shock, to call them back multiple times as you figure out who would be a good referral for them and who has openings so that you can match them in a good way rather than, what happens sometimes people get a list of like 3 names, none of whom are available, and every 30 patient in your practice gets those same 3 names. That's no good. So we take a lot of time and care to make sure people don't slip through the cracks. And then the record retention and so forth, all of those things take hours. And so from my experience, I say if you have 20 patients per week, it's going to take someone about 40 hours to do the work to close down your practice. And if you are going to pay them their hourly rate times 40 hours, depending what that rate is, your estate is going to get a $10,000 or $15,000 bill. So that's going to be a shocking hardship for your family at that time. It's a liability. So the way we have structured is we have clinicians who are on call to step in and do all of this. We have already, we used the attorneys and we consult with them regularly to create the legal document of the professional will. So even just that alone, if you were to go to a lawyer and say, I want to make a professional will, they're going to charge you between $1,500 and $3,000 to make a piece of paper that is legal, but doesn't actually perform any service for you, doesn't call your patients, doesn't keep the records, and you have to burden a friend with that. So these are all the costs that you need to think about if you don't want to use TheraClosure. Some people download a template from the internet. That's, a good place to start to think about what you need to do, but it's not comprehensive. It's not tailored to your practice. So given that all of that, including the costs of the record retention for those years, we charge a $450 a year. So depending, again, it might be the cost of 2 sessions a year. And the first year, there's an additional $200 fee for that 1-hour consultation and the creation of the will. And yearly, it's $450 to keep us on retainer. If we need to step in for you, there are no final costs for your estate. None. So all that clinical time and records, that's all included and covered.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to do some quick math here. That's really only, $38 a month to think about that. And that's even for a life insurance policy, you're going to pay more than that for something like that. And so to me, that's kind of a no-brainer to think about it in that way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we just really racked our brains trying to figure out how to solve each element of this stressful that people, of course, it's so overwhelming. So, people don't do it. And I did a survey and my survey said 69% of therapists do not have a professional will. So I am hoping that by outsourcing this, you like we do with our EHR or our billing person or our accountant or our maybe social media person, kind of say, I don't know about how to do this. I'm going to pay someone who is an expert, and it will be a burden lifted from my shoulders, and I can, not worry about it anymore. We created this to be that service for
Sure.
professional wills.
Oh, wow. Well, what a gift for therapists and psychologists and social workers and all of us in this business. Robyn, I've got to be respectful of your time, and I'm sure we'll have this conversation again, but tell folks how to find you, how to get in touch, how to get started with TheraClosure and all of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So you can find us at www.TheraClosure, TheraClosure.com. If you go on there, you can give us your email and we will send you for free a comprehensive, the ultimate professional will checklist. So you can go through and really think about the issues at hand and how you want to approach it. If you do want to use TheraClosure, you can schedule a free informational meeting with us. Whether you do or not, you want to use us, you can schedule a free information. If you do want to use us, you can enroll right directly from our website. And I would love to offer your listeners a 15% discount by using the code Gordon for their first year enrollment. So I hope you will reach out to folks.
Well, yes, and we'll have these links in the show summary and the show notes for people to access it easily. Well, Robyn, this has been a great conversation, and hopefully those listening have found this really enlightening, and this is such a valuable service. I don't know of any other service like this, so this is great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gordon. It's been a pleasure. You do such a great service by sharing so much information.
Yes, well, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, again, thanks to Dr. Robyn Miller for joining me on the podcast. And I hope that this episode has given you a lot to think about and a lot to consider just around making sure that we're creating a safety net for our families and potential colleagues and that sort of thing, just around worst case scenarios for our practice. None of us expects bad things to happen, but they do happen. And so I think the more we can prepare for that and the more we can be proactive with all of that, it's just going to be better for everyone all the way around. So be sure and check out Dr. Miller's website, and you'll find links here in the show notes. If you'll go to www.TheraClosure.com, and that will get you to the website to find out more about that. And also a big thanks to TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice. And one of the cool things that they've got now is they have now AI-assisted note-taking, and you've probably heard a lot of buzz around AI and writing progress notes and that sort of thing. Well, they've got it built into their platform, and we've been using it here in my practice. In fact, as I'm recording this, we just recently did a training here with my staff, and we just absolutely love it. It just cuts note writing and note taking down to nearly nothing. So be sure and check it out. Go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And if you'll use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, you can try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check that out. And also big thanks to our other sponsor and partner in this particular episode, and that is Fully Booked Pros. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/FBP, you can find out more about them. So be sure and check it out. And do take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And thanks for joining me on this journey. Got lots of great guests upcoming, and so I hope you'll come back and find out more. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting sitecraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.